The Arizona heat hit Colonel Sarah McKenzie like a physical force as she stepped out of the staff car at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Even at 700 hours, Tucson's desert sun was already climbing toward 90 degrees, the kind of dry, relentless heat that turned aircraft metal scorching to the touch. She stood for a moment, aviator sunglasses hiding eyes that had seen too much sky, too much war, and adjusted the manila folder tucked under her arm. Inside were her final orders, the kind that felt less like a mission brief and more like a death certificate. 22 years of service, 3 combat tour, 2 distinguished flying crosses, 1 failed marriage, and now this, administrative duty, the Air Force's polite way of saying her flying days were over. Sarah's boots, scuffed and broken in from years of walking flight lines from Bagram to Baghdad, carried her toward Hangar 7. The massive structure loomed ahead, its corrugated metal walls reflecting the morning light like a beacon, or maybe a tombstone. Inside those walls sat the last operational A-10 Thunderbolt IIs of the 354th Fighter Squadron, the legendary Warthogs that had been the backbone of close air support for 4 decades. The Pentagon had finally made it official. The A-10 program was being terminated. The jets would be retired, the squadron deactivated, and 40 years of combat aviation history would roll into the boneyard just a few miles away, where thousands of aircraft sat in neat rows, slowly baking into desert fossils. Her job, oversee the funeral. The hangar doors stood open and Sarah paused at the threshold, letting her eyes adjust to the dimmer interior. The smell hit her first, that intoxicating cocktail of jet fuel, hydraulic fluid, tire rubber, and metal that every pilot knew as intimately as their own heartbeat. It was the smell of purpose, of readiness, of missions and memories. Now it would fade into history. 6 A-10s sat in various states of readiness along the hangar floor. Even at rest, they looked aggressive, all sharp angles and brutal functionality. The A-10 wasn't beautiful by any conventional standard. With its twin engines mounted high on the fuselage, its straight wings built for low-altitude slugfests, and that massive GAU-8 Avenger cannon jutting from its nose like an accusing finger, the Warthog looked exactly like what it was: a flying gun platform designed to kill tanks and save soldiers. Sarah's eyes found aircraft 80242 almost immediately, drawn to it like a compass to north. Her bird. Well, it had been her bird, back when she was a captain flying combat missions over Iraq in 2003. She'd logged 847 hours in that specific airframe, more than any other pilot in the squadron's history. They'd been through hell together. She approached slowly, reverently, her hand reaching out to touch the titanium bathtub that surrounded the cockpit, the armored shell designed to protect the pilot from ground fire up to 23. Her fingers traced the scarred metal, finding the pockmarks where shrapnel had struck but not penetrated. Each mark told a story. There, that cluster near the canopy rail. That was from a mission outside Fallujah when she'd made a gun run so low she could see the enemy fighters' faces. The dent near the nose gear door. That was from the mission that earned her first DFC, when she'd stayed on station for 3 hours, well past bingo fuel, protecting a Marine patrol that had walked into an ambush. Beautiful, isn't she? Sarah turned to find Master Sergeant Ramon Vasquez approaching, a grease-stained rag in his weathered hands. Vasquez had been maintaining A-10s since before Sarah had even joined the Air Force. His hands had probably touched every rivet on 80242 at some point. Still is, Sarah replied, her voice carrying more emotion than she'd intended. Seems wrong, doesn't it? These birds still have fight left in them. Vasquez nodded, his jaw tight. Pentagon says they're obsolete. Say the F-35 can do everything better, faster, cheaper. He spat the words like they tasted bitter. Politicians who have never heard a 30 Mike cannon save their ass don't get to make that call if you ask me, but nobody's asking me. They're not asking any of us, Sarah said quietly. She glanced at the other aircraft in the hangar. How many are still flight-worthy? All 6, Vasquez said with evident pride. My crew's been keeping them mission-ready right up until the end. Force of habit, I guess, or maybe hope that some general would come to his senses. He looked at Sarah, his eyes sharp despite the gray in his hair. Heard you're here to shut us down, Colonel. That true? Sarah held up the manila folder. Final flight demonstration Friday. Ceremonial flyover for the brass, some speeches about proud service and noble history. Then we start the decommissioning process. Birds get ferried to Amarg. She used the acronym for the Aircraft Maintenance and Regeneration Group, the Boneyard's official name. And we all move on to our next assignments. And what's your next assignment, ma'am? Retirement. The word felt strange in her mouth, like speaking a foreign language. Terminal leave starts next month. My daughter graduates college in 3 weeks. I promised her I'd finally be a full-time mom for once. Vasquez studied her face for a long moment. You don't sound happy about it. Sarah turned back to 80242, her reflection distorted in the curve of the canopy. At 44, she could see the years in that reflection. The lines around her eyes from squinting into sun, the gray threading through her regulation bun, the slight sag in shoulders that had carried the weight of too many life-and-death decisions. She joined the Air Force at 22, fresh out of the academy, full of dreams about flying and serving. She'd missed her daughter's first steps because she was deployed. Missed birthdays, holidays, school plays. Her ex-husband had eventually given up competing with the Air Force for her attention. He'd remarried 2 years ago. Her daughter, Emily, now 21 and graduating from Georgetown, still signed her texts with "Love you, Mom." But there was distance there, the kind that accumulated over years of absence. I'm 44 years old, Sarah said finally. According to the actuarial tables, I've got another 40 years ahead of me, maybe more. That's a long time to feel obsolete. The word hung in the air between them. Obsolete, the same word the Pentagon had used about the A-10s. Colonel, with respect, you're not obsolete. Neither are these birds. Vasquez gestured around the hangar. The problem is the brass don't want to fight the kind of wars these jets were built for anymore. They want high-altitude, standoff, push-button warfare. They want to pretend war is clean and surgical. But when some 18-year-old kid is taking fire in a ditch somewhere and calling for help, he doesn't want an F-35 at 20,000 feet. He wants a hog at 200 feet, low and slow and ugly, with a gun that sounds like God's own zipper and a pilot who won't leave until he's safe. Sarah felt her throat tighten. She'd been that pilot dozens of times. She'd heard the desperation in radio calls from troops in contact, that edge of panic when they knew they were about to be overrun. And she'd rolled in again and again, putting herself between American soldiers and whatever was trying to kill them. That was the A-10's mission. That was her mission, had been her mission. Now it was time to let go. Orders are orders, Sergeant, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. We've got 4 days to prepare for the ceremony. Let's make it something these birds deserve, something the squadron deserves. Yes, ma'am. Vasquez straightened, the professional mask sliding back into place. My crew will have all 6 birds spotless and ready, you flying the lead. Sarah looked up at 80242 one more time. Yeah, one last time seems fitting. As Vasquez walked away to brief his maintenance team, Sarah climbed the crew ladder and settled into the cockpit. The seat molded to her body like an old glove. Hundreds of hours had formed it to her exact shape. She didn't power up the systems, just sat there in the silence, hands resting on the stick and throttles, eyes scanning the familiar instrument panel. Every switch, every gauge, every button was muscle memory. Through the canopy, she could see the mountains in the distance, heat shimmers already rising from the desert floor. Somewhere out there, beyond those mountains and across oceans, soldiers were still fighting, still bleeding, still calling for help. And soon, there would be one fewer tool to answer those calls. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself feel the grief of it, for the jets, for her career, for the part of herself that would die when she signed those retirement papers. Then she took a breath, opened her eyes, and climbed back down the ladder. She had a ceremony to plan. She had no way of knowing that in less than 18 hours, planning would become the last thing on her mind. That the red phone in the operations center would ring with the kind of call that changed everything. That these 6 obsolete aircraft would become the only thing standing between life and death for 12 Americans she'd never met. Colonel Sarah Mackenzie walked out of Hangar 7 into the blazing Arizona sun, her shadow stretching long behind her, and began what she thought would be the last 4 days of her military career. She was wrong. The morning briefing room felt too empty. Sarah stood at the front, facing 3 pilots instead of the 12 who would have filled these chairs during the squadron's peak years. Captain James Taro Torres sat in the front row, arms crossed, his jaw set in the permanent scowl he'd worn since learning about the retirement. To his left, Major Lisa Viper Chen scrolled through her tablet, pulling up flight demonstration parameters with mechanical efficiency. In the back, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Preacher Williams, the squadron's operations officer and Sarah's second-in-command, nursed a coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. These were the last of the 354th. Everyone else had already been reassigned, scattered to F-35 squadrons or desk jobs or their own retirements. These 4 had volunteered to stay until the bitter end. "All right, listen up," Sarah began, tapping the screen behind her to life. A flight path diagram appeared, a graceful arc over the Tucson Valley designed to give the VIPs and media a perfect view of the formation. Friday, 1400 hours, 4-ship diamond formation. Will launch from runway 12, climb to Angels 5, execute the ceremonial flyover, then a missing man formation over the base. After landing, we taxi to the static display area where the ceremony will take place. "Speeches about our glorious service," Torres muttered, "while they take away the only jet that actually does the job." "Stow it, Taro," Williams said quietly, but without much conviction. Sarah understood Torres' anger. At 32, he was young enough that the A-10 was all he'd ever known, but old enough to have seen combat, 2 rotations providing close air support in Syria. He'd saved lives. He'd done the mission. And now the Air Force was telling him his expertise was obsolete, that he needed to retrain on the F-35 or accept a desk assignment. Chen looked up from her tablet. "Flight parameters are loaded, Colonel. Weather forecast is perfect, clear skies, light winds. At least we'll go out in style." "That's the plan," Sarah said, though the words felt hollow. Style, as if any amount of pageantry could make up for what they were losing. The door opened and Vasquez stuck his head in. "Colonel, you've got VIPs incoming. Base commander wants you at the static display in 20. Sarah nodded, dismissed the pilots, and headed out into the Arizona heat. The static display area was already being transformed. A stage had been erected, complete with podium and sound system. Rows of chairs faced the platform. Behind it all, 3 A-10s had been positioned in a perfect line, their noses pointing skyward at identical angles. Maintenance crews were polishing every surface, making the birds gleam in ways they never did on an active flight line. It looked like a funeral. Colonel David Martinez, the base commander, stood near the stage talking with 2 civilians in expensive suits, probably congressional staffers or Pentagon liaisons. He waved Sarah over. "Mackenzie, good. These gentlemen are from the Undersecretary's office. They're here to coordinate the media messaging for Friday." Martinez was a career logistics officer who'd never flown combat, and his enthusiasm for the ceremony felt performative. "We're expecting CNN, Fox, local stations. This is going to be quite the event." One of the civilians, a thin man with wireframe glasses, extended his hand. "Colonel Mackenzie, I've heard impressive things about your service. This will be a wonderful opportunity to celebrate the A-10's legacy while explaining the strategic rationale for transitioning to 5th-generation platforms." Sarah shook his hand with the minimum required courtesy. The strategic rationale. The F-35 offers stealth capabilities, advanced sensors, network-centric warfare integration. The F-35 can't loiter for hours at 200 feet, can't take battle damage like a Warthog can, and its gun holds a fraction of the ammunition, Sarah interrupted, her voice level but hard. When a soldier is pinned down taking fire, he needs an aircraft that can get low, get close, and stay until the job is done. That's not strategy. That's reality. An awkward silence settled over the group. Martinez cleared his throat. Colonel Mackenzie has very strong feelings about the A-10, as you can imagine. That passion is exactly what will make Friday's ceremony so meaningful. The civilian recovered his politician's smile. Of course, emotion is important, but we also need to message the future. Perhaps in your remarks, you could emphasize how the lessons learned from the A-10 program will inform. I'll emphasize that we're retiring a combat-proven platform that saved countless American lives, Sarah said flatly. I'll let you handle the spin. She walked away before Martinez could reprimand her, heading back toward the hangar. Her phone buzzed, a text from Emily. "Mom, you're still coming to graduation, right? Please tell me this last-minute assignment won't make you miss it again." Sarah stopped walking, staring at the message. How many times had she sent similar texts? "Sorry, honey, deployment extended." "Sorry, emergency training exercise." "Sorry, the mission changed." Her daughter's childhood had been a series of apologies and missed moments. She typed back, "I'll be there, I promise. Retirement starts right after this ceremony. You'll be sick of having me around." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, "I'll believe it when I see it." The words stung because they were earned. Sarah had broken promises before, always for good reasons. Duty, service, lives depending on her. But to Emily, reasons didn't heal the wounds of absence. "Colonel." Sarah looked up to find Chen jogging toward her, tablet in hand, her expression troubled. "What is it, Viper?" "Ma'am, I was reviewing the ceremony timeline and cross-checking with operational traffic." Chen pulled up a screen showing global Air Force deployments. "There's something weird happening. CENTCOM just elevated their alert status. Multiple requests for close air support assets in Sector 7. Sarah felt a prickle of unease. Sector 7 was their designation for a particularly nasty region where special operations teams conducted ongoing advising missions with allied forces. What kind of requests? Heavy armor threats. They're asking for A-10 specifically. Chen looked up, her eyes sharp. "Ma'am, someone at CENTCOM doesn't know we're standing down. They keep putting out tasking orders for Warthog support." "They'll figure it out when they don't get any responses," Sarah said, but the unease deepened. "What's the threat situation?" "Intel spotty, but it looks like enemy forces are moving armor into the region. T-72s, BMPs. Our special forces teams are supposed to be in advisory roles only, but..." Chen trailed off. But advisory roles had a way of becoming combat roles when the shooting started. Sarah knew that from experience. She'd seen missions go sideways, seen advisors become combatants when ambushes materialized out of seemingly quiet sectors. "Keep monitoring," Sarah ordered. "Let me know if anything develops." As Chen headed back to the operations center, Sarah found herself looking east, toward that distant conflict. Somewhere out there, American soldiers were doing their jobs, trusting that if things went bad, if they needed help, the Air Force would answer the call. But the A-10s, the aircraft specifically designed for their kind of fight, were being mothballed. The afternoon was consumed by ceremony minutiae. Sarah reviewed speeches, coordinated with the base honor guard, approved the program layout. Through it all, her mind kept drifting to Chen's report. Armor threats. A-10 requests. She told herself it was fine, that other assets would handle it, that this wasn't her problem anymore. By 1800 hours, she was exhausted and irritable. She grabbed dinner at the officers' club, a sad chicken breast and overcooked vegetables, and ate alone at a corner table, scrolling through her phone. News articles about the A-10 retirement, opinion pieces debating its necessity, comments from armchair strategists who'd never heard a bullet fired in anger. Her phone rang. Williams. "Boss, you need to get to the ops center, now." The tone in his voice clipped, urgent, sent Sarah's pulse spiking. She abandoned her dinner and was out the door in seconds, her truck screeching out of the parking lot. The ops center was a 3-minute drive that she made in 90 seconds. She burst through the door to find chaos. Radios crackling, controllers hunched over screens, the tension thick enough to taste. Williams met her at the entrance, his face grim. "Talk to me, preacher." ODA 754, 12-man Special Forces team in Sector 7. They were running a routine patrol with Allied militia when they got hit. Ambushed. Heavy armor, lots of it. They're pinned down in a mountain valley, surrounded, taking casualties. Sarah's blood ran cold. What's their support? That's the problem. F-35 squadron at Al-Udeid is grounded. Massive weather system. Zero visibility. F-16s out of Kuwait don't have the legs to reach the location and maintain station time. They've got drones overhead, but Hellfire missiles won't stop T-72s. CENTCOM is scrambling to find something, anything, that can get there with enough firepower. Sarah was already moving toward the comm station. What's their time? Maybe 90 minutes before they're overrun. Enemy armors advancing in a pincer movement. She reached the duty officer's station and grabbed the handset for the secure line. "This is Colonel Mackenzie, 354th Fighter Squadron. Give me a direct link to CENTCOM air operations." The duty officer, a young captain whose name tag read MORRISON, stared at her. "Ma'am, the 354th is in decommissioned status. We're not." "I don't care what status we're in. 12 Americans are about to die. Get me CENTCOM now." Morrison hesitated for one more second, then nodded and started punching buttons. Moments later, a connection crackled to life. "This is Brigadier General Hawthorne, CENTCOM Air Ops. Who am I speaking with?" "Colonel Sarah Mackenzie, sir. I command the last operational A-10 squadron. I understand you have troops in contact requiring close air support." A pause. "Mackenzie, your squadron is being retired. You're not in the rotation." "Sir, with respect, what I am is the only platform within reasonable range that can stop heavy armor and stay on station. I have 6 mission-capable aircraft and 4 pilots. We can launch in 30 minutes with full combat load." Another pause, longer this time. Sarah could hear muffled voices in the background, urgent discussion. "Colonel, your birds are in decommissioned status. Insurance, maintenance certification, weapon system authorization, none of that is active. This would be highly irregular." "What would be highly irregular, sir, is explaining to 12 families why we let their soldiers die when we had assets available." Sarah's voice was steel. "Give me emergency authorization and I'll handle the rest." Silence stretched. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down. Somewhere in a mountain valley 7,000 miles away, men were fighting for their lives. The clock was ticking. Finally, "Stand by for encrypted orders. You're authorized to launch under emergency combat conditions. God help us all if this goes wrong." The line went dead. Sarah turned to find Williams, Chen, Torres, and Vasquez all staring at her. The hangar beyond the windows held 6 Warthogs that were supposed to be retired in 3 days. "Gear up," Sarah said quietly. "We're going back to war." First explosion came without warning. Staff Sergeant Mike Reeves was walking point when the RPG screamed past his head and detonated against the rocky outcrop behind him, showering his 12-man team with shrapnel and pulverized stone. His ears rang. His vision blurred. Training took over before conscious thought. He dropped into a crouch, weapon up, scanning for targets through the dust and smoke. "Contact, contact left," someone screamed into the radio. Then the world exploded into chaos. Machine gun fire raked their position from 3 directions simultaneously. The distinctive crack of AK-47s mixed with the heavier thump of PKM belt feds. Bullets snapped through the air with that peculiar whip-crack sound that meant they were passing inches from flesh. Reeves's team scattered, diving for whatever cover the barren valley offered. Rocks, a dried streambed, the burned-out hull of an old Soviet-era truck. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were advisors. They were supposed to be 20 miles south, conducting a routine liaison meeting with Allied militia commanders. A milk run, safe enough that half the team had been joking about what they'd have for dinner back at base. Instead, they'd walk straight into a kill zone. Raven 6, this is Titan 2. We are troops in contact. Heavy enemy force, multiple fighting positions. Captain Brad Hoffman, the team leader, shouted into his radio while pressing himself against a boulder. Bullets chewed into the rock above his head, sending stone chips flying. "We need QRF and air support now." Reeves low-crawled to a position next to Sergeant First Class Tommy Chen, the team's weapons specialist. Chen was already setting up the M240 machine gun, his movements fast and efficient despite the bullets cracking around them. Their 30 Allied militia fighters were scattered across the valley floor, some returning fire, others frozen in shock. "Mike, we got big problems," Chen shouted over the gunfire, pointing toward the ridgeline. Reeves looked up and felt his stomach drop. Rolling over the crest of the hill, silhouetted against the pale morning sky, came the unmistakable shape of a T-72 main battle tank. Then another. Then a third. Behind them, BMP infantry fighting vehicles, tracked armor carriers mounting 30 cannons and carrying infantry squads. Reeves counted at least 6 BMPs, maybe more emerging from the dust. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "Titan 2, be advised, we have enemy armor. Multiple T-72s, BMPs, this is a deliberate ambush." The first tank's main gun fired with a thunderous boom that Reeves felt in his chest. The 125 round screamed overhead and exploded 50 meters behind their position, the blast wave nearly lifting him off the ground. The militia fighters who'd been taking cover there simply ceased to exist. This was no ragtag insurgent force. This was a coordinated military operation with heavy armor support. Someone had known they'd be here. Someone had set a trap specifically designed to kill American Special Forces. Fall back to the wadi," Hoffman screamed, his voice barely audible over the crescendo of gunfire and explosions. The team moved in bounds, one group providing covering fire while the other ran, then switching. Reeves sprinted 20 meters and dove behind a cluster of rocks, his lungs burning, his heart hammering. Next to him, Specialist Danny Martinez, their medic, 23 years old, engaged to a girl back in Texas, gasped for air, his face pale. "We're gonna die here, aren't we?" Martinez said, his voice shaking. "Shut up and shoot," Reeves snapped, but his own hands were trembling as he changed magazines. They fell back to a dried riverbed that offered slightly better cover, a natural trench about 4 feet deep that snaked through the valley. It wasn't much, but it was something. The team and their remaining militia allies, maybe 20 of the original 30 still alive, consolidated into a defensive perimeter roughly 50 meters across. Captain Hoffman was on the radio, his voice urgent but controlled. "Raven 6, Titan 2, we are taking effective fire from enemy armor. We have used 2 Javelin missiles, killed 1 tank, but we're down to 1 missile remaining. Enemy forces are advancing on our position from 3 sides. We need immediate air support." The radio crackled back. "Titan 2, Raven 6, copy your situation. F-35s from Al-Udeid are grounded due to weather. F-16s out of Kuwait are being scrambled, but ETA is 90 minutes. Drones are being redirected to your position." 90 minutes, Hoffman's voice rose. We don't have 90 minutes. We need something with bigger guns now. Another tank round exploded, this one closer, spraying the wadi with dirt and rocks. Reeves felt something hot slice across his arm, shrapnel. Blood soaked through his sleeve, but he ignored it. Around him, the team's weapons specialist, Sergeant Davis, fired the last Javelin missile. The top attack anti-tank weapon streaked skyward, then arced down onto one of the BMPs. The vehicle exploded in a satisfying fireball, but there were still 2 T-72s and at least 4 BMPs rolling toward them. "Contact right," someone yelled. Infantry had dismounted from the BMPs and were advancing on foot now, using the armor as cover. Reeves could see them, maybe 40 or 50 fighters, well-equipped, moving with military precision. This wasn't militia. This was regular army, probably from across the border, conducting an operation they'd planned for weeks. The Americans opened up with everything they had. M4 carbines, M240 machine guns, M203 grenade launchers. Brass casings flew. The smell of cordite filled the air. Men fell on both sides. One of the militia fighters took a round through the throat and dropped beside Reeves, blood pumping out in rhythmic spurts until it stopped. Reeves's magazine ran dry. He dropped it, slammed in a fresh one, kept firing. His training had taken over completely now. There was no fear, no thought, just the mechanical process of identifying targets, aiming, firing, reloading. But even through the adrenaline fog, he could do the math. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of anti-armor weapons. The tanks were getting closer. Staff Sergeant Joe Williams, the team's communications sergeant, scrambled over to Hoffman. "Sir, Raven 6 is asking if we can provide laser designation for drone strikes." "Tell them yes, but drone hellfires won't stop those tanks." Hoffman fired a burst from his rifle, dropping an enemy fighter who'd gotten within 50 meters. "We need heavy ordnance, close air support with big guns." The radio crackled again, a different voice this time, someone higher up the chain. "Titan II, be advised, we are working emergency tasking for specialized CAS assets. ETA unknown. Hold your position." "Hold our position," Chen shouted, firing the M240 in controlled bursts. "Where the hell are we supposed to go?" Another tank round hit, this one inside their perimeter. The explosion killed 2 militia fighters instantly and wounded a third, who screamed in agony. Martinez scrambled to help him, crawling through the dirt under fire, his medical bag already half empty from treating casualties. Reeves glanced at his watch. They'd been in contact for 37 minutes. It felt like hours. His ammunition was running low, down to 3 magazines. He looked around the wadi and saw the same story on every face: exhaustion, fear, determination, and the growing realization that they might not make it out. A BMP's 30 cannon opened up, stitching a line of explosions across their position. Dirt and rocks flew everywhere. Reeves pressed himself flat, feeling the impacts through the ground itself. When he looked up, he saw that one of the T-72s had advanced to within 200 meters. Its turret was traversing, the massive gun barrel swinging toward their position like the finger of death. "That tank's got us zeroed," someone screamed. Captain Hoffman was back on the radio, his professional composure finally cracking. "Raven 6, Titan II, enemy armor is within minimum engagement distance. We are about to be overrun. Where is that air support?" "Static then, Titan II stand by. Emergency CAS package inbound. Call sign Hog 01 ETA. They're launching now." Hoffman pressed his hand to his ear, trying to hear over the gunfire. "Say again, what platform?" "A-10 Warthogs, 4 ship, they're coming." For a moment the chaos around them seemed to pause. A-10s, Warthogs, the flying tanks, the close air support platform that every ground soldier loved and every enemy feared. But they'd been retired, hadn't they? Reeves had heard something about that. The T-72's gun fired. The world went white, then black, then red. Reeves found himself on his back, ears ringing worse than before, his rifle torn from his hands. He tasted blood and dirt. Slowly, painfully, he rolled over and found his weapon, checked himself for wounds, still intact. Mostly. How long until the Warthogs arrived? 20 minutes, 30, an hour. They had to hold until then. Somehow they had to hold. Reeves grabbed his rifle, checked the magazine, 18 rounds left, and got back into position. Around him, the 11 other Americans and their remaining allies prepared for the next assault. Above them, the enemy tanks rolled closer, their guns reloading. The Warthogs were coming. They just had to survive long enough. The secure phone on the operations center wall rang with a shrill urgency that cut through every other sound in the room. Everyone froze. That particular phone, red, hardwired, encrypted, only rang when something had gone catastrophically wrong or was about to. Captain Morrison grabbed it on the second ring. Operations Center, Captain Morrison speaking, line is secure. Sarah watched the blood drain from his face as he listened. He turned toward her, eyes wide. Colonel Mackenzie, it's General Hawthorne at CENTCOM. He's asking for you specifically, ma'am. Sarah's pulse kicked up as she crossed the room and took the handset. This is Colonel Mackenzie. Mackenzie, Jim Hawthorne. The general's voice was gravelly, exhausted. I'm going to be direct because we don't have time for protocol. I have 12 Americans and 30 Allied fighters pinned down in a valley about to be overrun by enemy armor. My F-35s can't fly due to weather. My F-16s can't reach them in time. My drones can't kill tanks. And I'm staring at a screen that says the only A-10 squadron still operational is yours, except your squadron's being decommissioned. So I need you to tell me if that's actually true, or if those birds can still fly. Sarah felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders like a physical force. Through the operations center windows, she could see Hangar 7 in the distance, those 6 Warthogs sitting in their ceremonial positions, waxed and polished for a funeral that was supposed to happen in less than 72 hours. Sir, we have 6 mission-capable aircraft, she said carefully, but we're in decommissioning status. The paperwork's been filed. We're not in the operational rotation. Insurance coverage has lapsed. Weapons system certifications expired 3 days ago when we officially stood down. We have 4 pilots, including myself, but none of us are technically on flying status anymore. Colonel, I don't give a damn about paperwork. Hawthorne's voice cut through her litany like a knife. Can you fly those aircraft or not? Sarah looked around the operations center. William stood nearby, his face tense, waiting. Chen had appeared in the doorway, still holding her tablet. Tors leaned against a console, arms crossed, but his eyes were locked on Sarah. They all knew what was being asked. They all knew what it meant. Yes, sir, Sarah said quietly. We can fly them. How fast can you launch? Sarah's mind raced, calculating fuel loads, weapons configurations, crew rest requirements, pre-flight procedures, mission planning. With emergency protocols, 45 minutes to an hour for takeoff, then approximately 8 hours flight time with 1 mid-air refuel. Sir, that puts us on station in 9 hours. They don't have 9 hours. They have maybe 90 minutes. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. 90 minutes. Even if they launched immediately, they'd arrive to find bodies, not survivors. She started to say this, started to explain the impossible mathematics of time and distance, when Hawthorne continued. But there's a KC-135 tanker at Ramstein that can reposition and meet you over the Mediterranean. We can cut your flight time to 6.5 hours if you launch in the next 30 minutes. That gives the ground team 3 hours to hold. It's tight as hell, but it's all we've got. 30 minutes. Sarah looked at her watch. 1847 hours. Wheels up by 1917. With aircraft that weren't technically authorized to fly, pilots who weren't technically on flight status, using weapons systems that weren't technically certified to fly a combat mission that wasn't technically sanctioned. Sir, what about authorization, if something goes wrong? I'm giving you verbal authorization right now under Emergency Combat Authority. I'll have written orders transmitted to you within 10 minutes, signed by me and countersigned by CENTCOM Commander. This is happening, Colonel. The only question is whether you're willing to fly the mission." Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, probably Emily again, asking about graduation plans, about whether her mother would actually be there this time. 3 weeks. She was 3 weeks from retirement, from finally keeping her promises, from being the mother she'd always meant to be. She thought about 12 men in a valley she'd never seen, fighting for their lives against an enemy that outnumbered and outgunned them. She thought about the families who'd get folded flags if those men died. She thought about the empty platitudes at their funerals, gave their lives in service to their country. But mostly she thought about the sound of a radio call from troops in contact, that desperate edge of panic when men knew they were about to die. She'd heard that sound too many times. She'd answered it too many times. How could she not answer it now? "Sir, I need to be clear about what we're facing," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "We haven't flown combat in years. My aircraft are maintained, but they're 40-year-old airframes with worn components. We don't have current intelligence packages or updated threat assessments. Our pilots will be operating on minimal crew rest. If we take damage, there's no recovery plan. We're too far from friendly territory. And if this mission goes sideways, careers will end. Mine. My pilots, probably yours too. Understood, will you launch?" The operations center had gone absolutely silent. Everyone was watching her, waiting. Sarah could feel the decades of service behind her, the years of training, the combat missions, the lives saved, the promises made to herself and to every soldier who'd ever trusted the Air Force to be there when it mattered most. She thought about obsolescence, about being told you weren't needed anymore, about legacy and purpose and the difference between retiring with honor and retiring with regret. "Yes, sir," Sarah said. "We'll launch." "Thank you, Colonel." Hawthorne's voice carried genuine relief. "Encrypted mission package is being transmitted now. Call sign for the ground team is Titan 2. They're going to be damn happy to hear your engines." The line went dead. Sarah set down the phone and turned to face her team. Williams, Chen, Tors, they'd all heard her side of the conversation. They knew what came next. "We have 30 minutes to launch 4 aircraft on a combat rescue mission," Sarah said, her command voice filling the room. "Maintenance status." Vasquez had appeared in the doorway, already pulling on his crew chief vest. "Give me 20 minutes and I'll have 4 birds loaded and ready. Full combat package, Mavericks, rockets, max 30. What's the target?" "Enemy armor, T-72s and BMPs. We're going tank hunting." A grim smile crossed Vasquez's face. "That's what these birds were built for, Colonel. We'll have them ready." "Do it." Sarah turned to Tors and Chen. "Get to the life support shop, draw your gear. Full combat load, survival vests, NVGs, everything. We brief in 15 minutes. "Ma'am," Chen said quietly, "this is really happening. We're actually launching." "We're actually launching." Tors pushed off the console, his perpetual scowl replaced by something else. Purpose, maybe, or vindication. "About damn time. I'll take aircraft 80247. "Preacher," Sarah said, turning to Williams. "You're staying here. I need someone running operations who knows what's happening." Williams looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. "I'll coordinate with CENTCOM, handle the tanker rendezvous timing, and keep the base commander off your ass when he figures out what you're doing. He's going to be pissed. He can get in line behind the Pentagon, Congress, and probably the Secretary of Defense." Williams managed a tight smile. "But they can all be pissed after you bring those soldiers home. Now get moving, boss. Clock's ticking." Sarah was already heading for the door when Morrison called out, "Colonel, the written orders just came through. You're officially authorized for emergency combat operations under CENTCOM authority. Print them, file them, and pray we don't need them as evidence at the court-martial." She burst through the door into the night air, Williams right behind her. The hangar was already alive with activity, maintenance crews swarming over the aircraft, weapons carts rolling into position, fuel trucks positioning for rapid refuel. Sarah's truck ate up the distance to the life support shop in 90 seconds. She burst through the door and started grabbing gear: G-suit, survival vest, helmet, NVGs, 9mm sidearm. Her hands moved through the familiar routine, muscle memory taking over. Her phone buzzed again, Emily's name on the screen. Sarah stared at it for 3 seconds, then made a decision she'd regret for years. She silenced it and shoved it in her locker. Some promises would have to wait. Right now, 12 men were counting on her to keep a different promise. The one she'd made 22 years ago when she'd raised her right hand and sworn to defend her country. That promise didn't come with an expiration date. Sarah strapped on her gear, grabbed her helmet bag, and headed for the flight line at a run. The Warthogs were waking up. The flight line had transformed into controlled chaos. Sarah sprinted across the tarmac toward Hangar 7, her flight gear bouncing against her body with each stride. The desert night had turned cool, dropping from 90 degrees to the low 60s, and the temperature shock hit her overheated skin like a slap. She could hear the hangar before she saw it, the whine of hydraulic systems, the shout of crew chiefs coordinating over the roar of equipment, the metallic clang of weapons being loaded onto pylons. 4 A-10s had been towed out of the hangar and sat in a line, nose to tail, their engines silent but their weapons stations alive with activity. Maintenance crews swarmed over each aircraft like purposeful ants, every person knowing exactly what needed to happen and how little time they had to make it happen. Master Sergeant Vasquez stood in the middle of it all, a radio in one hand and a clipboard in the other, orchestrating the chaos like a conductor leading a symphony. He spotted Sarah and jogged over. 23 minutes since you got the call, Colonel. We're ahead of schedule. He thrust the clipboard at her. Aircraft assignments. You're in 80242, Tor's in 80247, Chen in 80231, and I put Lieutenant Simmons in 80198. Sarah's head snapped up. Simmons, where did? I thought we only had 3 pilots. Lieutenant Amy Simmons reported for duty 30 minutes ago. She was supposed to start out processing tomorrow but heard the alert and volunteered. She's got 340 hours in the hog, including 1 combat rotation. I took the liberty of calling her in. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude. 4 aircraft, 4 pilots. They'd have a proper fighting formation. Where is she? Suiting up. She'll be here in 5 minutes. Vasquez pointed at the aircraft. Each bird's loaded with 6 AGM-65 Mavericks, 2 rocket pods with 7 rockets each, and 1,100 rounds of 30. We're maxing out fuel and hanging 2 external tanks for extended range. You'll be heavy, but you'll have the legs to make the mission and the firepower to kill anything that moves. Sarah looked at the weapons being loaded, each Maverick missile weighing nearly 500 pounds, designed specifically to destroy tanks and armored vehicles. The 30 ammunition was a mix of high-explosive incendiary and armor-piercing rounds, including the depleted uranium penetrators that could punch through any armor on Earth. This was the Warthog's true calling: tank killing. Time to take off. Vasquez checked his watch. 14 minutes if everything goes perfect, 16 if we hit any snags. Make it perfect. Sarah moved to 80242, her bird, and began her walk-around inspection. Even in the rush, even with lives hanging in the balance, she wouldn't skip this. Flying was about discipline, about following procedures especially when things were urgent. She checked the landing gear, the control surfaces, the engine intakes. She ran her hand along the fuselage, feeling the patches where battle damage had been repaired over 40 years of service. This aircraft had been built in 1980, 2 years before Sarah was born. It had flown in Desert Storm, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. It had saved countless lives. Tonight it would do it again. Tors and Chen arrived together, both moving with the focused intensity of pilots preparing for combat. Tors gave Sarah a curt nod. Loaded for bear, boss, just like old times. Except old times didn't involve launching aircraft that are technically retired, Chen said, but she was smiling tightly. My husband's going to kill me when he finds out about this. Get in line behind the Pentagon, Sarah replied. A young woman in a flight suit jogged up, Lieutenant Simmons, blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun, her face set with determination. She couldn't have been more than 26. Colonel Mackenzie, Lieutenant Amy Simmons reporting. Master Sergeant Vasquez said you needed a fourth pilot. Sarah studied her for a moment. You know what you're volunteering for, Lieutenant. This mission is unauthorized. If it goes wrong, your career is over before it starts. Ma'am, with respect, I didn't join the Air Force to have a career. I joined to fly jets and save soldiers. If we're not doing that, what's the point? Simmons met Sarah's eyes without flinching. I'm ready. Sarah felt something shift inside her, pride, maybe, or recognition of her younger self in this eager lieutenant. Welcome to Hog Flight. You're taking the number 4 position. Stay on my wing, follow my lead, and we'll get through this. Yes, ma'am. All pilots, listen up. Sarah raised her voice to carry over the noise. Brief is now. We're launching in 12 minutes, so pay attention. Our call sign is Hog Flight. I'm Hog 01, Tors is 2, Chen is 3, Simmons is 4. We're flying direct to the tanker rendezvous point over the Mediterranean, then pushing to the target area, a mountain valley where a 12-man Special Forces team is pinned down by enemy armor. Threat assessment: multiple T-72 tanks, BMP fighting vehicles, and infantry. Weather at target is clear, good visibility. We'll arrive at dawn local time. She pulled up a tactical map on her tablet, the other pilots crowding around. The ground team's call sign is Titan 2. They're in this valley here, surrounded on 3 sides. Enemy armor is advancing from the north and west. Our job is simple. Kill every piece of armor we can find and keep killing until the ground team can extract or until we're Winchester on ordnance. Questions. Rules of engagement, Chen asked. Anything that's not friendly. The JTAC on the ground will mark friendlies. Everything else is fair game. These are troops in contact. We're cleared hot on arrival. Fuel status, Tors asked. We'll be operating at max range. 1 mid-air refuel going in, hopefully 1 coming out if there's a tanker available. If we take battle damage, our divert base is. Sarah paused, checking her mission data. There isn't one. We're too far from friendly territory. If we get hit and can't make it home, we punch out and hope search and rescue can find us before the bad guys do. The weight of that statement settled over the group. They'd be flying into combat with no safety net, no backup plan, no guarantee of rescue if things went wrong. This was old-school combat aviation, the kind that required courage and skill in equal measure. Anything else? Sarah asked. Silence. Then Simmons raised her hand slightly. Ma'am, just want to say it's an honor to fly with you, all of you. Let's bring those soldiers home. That's the plan, Lieutenant. Sarah checked her watch. Mount up. Engines start in 8 minutes. The pilots dispersed to their aircraft. Sarah climbed the crew ladder to A-10-242's cockpit, settled into the seat that had molded to her body over hundreds of hours, and began strapping in. The 5-point harness, the G-suit connections, the oxygen mask, the helmet with its integrated display. Each item clicked into place with satisfying precision. Around her, the familiar cockpit wrapped her in purpose. The throttles sat under her left hand, worn smooth by decades of pilot's grip. The control stick sat between her knees, festooned with buttons and switches for weapons employment. The heads-up display projected data onto the canopy in front of her eyes. Every gauge, every switch, every dial was exactly where it should be. Sarah ran through her checklist, the litany of procedures she could recite in her sleep. Master arms safe, throttles off, Fuel, check quantity. Hydraulics, check pressure. Flight controls, check operation. The pre-start ritual that transformed a collection of metal and electronics into a weapon of war. Her hand hovered over the battery switch. Once she flipped it, there was no going back. They'd be committed. Her retirement would wait. Emily's graduation would wait. The promises she'd made to be a better mother, to finally put family first, all of it would wait. Because somewhere in a mountain valley, 12 men couldn't wait. Sarah flipped the battery switch. Instruments came alive, glowing softly in the darkness. She advanced the throttles to idle and pressed the start button for the right engine. The turbine began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, the whine building to a roar as fuel ignited and the engine came to life. She repeated the process for the left engine. Both engines settled into a steady rumble, the aircraft trembling with barely contained power. "Hog flight, check in," Sarah called over the radio. 2, Torres replied. 3, Chen confirmed. 4, Simmons added, her voice tight with nervous energy. "Tower, Hog 01 flight of 4, request taxi clearance for immediate departure." A pause then. "Hog 01, you're cleared to taxi, direct to runway 12, winds 280 at 8 knots. You're cleared for immediate takeoff, no delay, good hunting." Sarah advanced the throttles slightly, feeling 80-242 begin to roll. Behind her, the other 3 Warthogs fell into line, taxiing in single file toward the runway. The tower's farewell echoed in her helmet. Good hunting. They'd need more than good hunting. They'd need skill, courage, and a healthy dose of luck. Sarah reached the runway threshold and turned into position. The runway lights stretched ahead, a corridor of white leading into darkness. She pushed the throttles forward, felt the engines respond, felt the aircraft accelerate. 50 knots, 70, 100. The nose gear lifted, 120. The main gear left the ground and 80-242 was flying, clawing into the night sky, leaving the safety of home behind. One by one, the other Warthogs followed, climbing into formation. "Hog flight is airborne," Sarah transmitted. "Time to go save some lives." The desert lights fell away below. Ahead lay an ocean, a war, and 12 men who didn't know help was coming. But it was. The Atlantic Ocean stretched beneath them like black glass, reflecting starlight in a way that made it impossible to tell where water ended and sky began. Sarah flew in the darkness, instruments glowing softly in her cockpit, the steady rumble of her engines the only sound besides her own breathing through the oxygen mask. They'd been airborne for 3 hours. Her back ached from sitting in the ejection seat. Her legs were cramping despite the G-suit. Her eyes burned from staring at instruments and scanning the horizon. This was the part of combat flying no one talked about, not the glory of aerial combat or the precision of weapons employment, but the grinding tedium of hours spent crossing empty ocean, alone with your thoughts and the slow creep of fatigue. "Hog flight, this is Shell 62. Your tanker is at your 12 o'clock, 30 miles, Angels 25, the radio crackled. The KC-135 Stratotanker had repositioned from Ramstein Air Base in Germany, burning through fuel and crew rest hours to meet them over the Mediterranean. Without that tanker, the mission was impossible. "Copy Shell 62, Hog 01 has visual." Sarah could see the tanker's lights in the distance, a constellation moving through the darkness. "Hog flight, check fuel state." "Hog 02, 4,000 pounds, Torres reported, getting low." "Hog 03, 3,800, Chen added, critically low." "Hog 04, 4,200, Simmons confirmed." Sarah checked her own gauges, 3,600 pounds. They'd been flying heavy with external tanks and full weapons load, burning fuel at a higher rate than normal. Without this refuel, they'd never make it to the target, let alone back home. "Shell 62, Hog 01, we're coming in for gas, 4 ship individual approaches." "Roger, Hog 01, cleared to pre-contact position, ready when you are." Sarah throttled back slightly, and positioned 80-0242 behind and below the massive tanker. The KC-135's boom, a long, articulated arm with a fuel nozzle at the end, extended from its tail, waiting. At 350 knots and 25,000 feet, she maneuvered into position, closing the distance with practiced precision. This was delicate work, flying formation on a moving target while maintaining exact distance and position. The boom operator's voice came through. Hog 01, you're cleared to contact position. Forward 2, up 1. Sarah nudged the stick forward and up, creeping closer. The boom lowered toward her aircraft's receptacle just behind the cockpit. Closer, closer. Contact. The boom locked into place with a solid thunk she felt through the airframe. Contact, take fuel, the boom operator confirmed. JP-8 jet fuel began flowing into her tanks at hundreds of gallons per minute. Sarah held position, her eyes locked on the tanker's belly, her hands making constant microcorrections to the stick and throttles. Flying this close to another aircraft in darkness required absolute concentration. One mistake, one moment of inattention, and they'd collide. Numbers scrolled across her fuel gauge: 5,000 pounds, 7,000, 9,000. Her tanks filling, giving her the range she needed, but filling tanks couldn't fill the growing sense of dread in her chest. What the hell was she doing? The thought came unbidden, unwelcome. She was 44 years old, flying a 40-year-old aircraft on an unauthorized combat mission to a war zone she'd never seen, to save soldiers she'd never met. She hadn't flown combat in 6 years. Her reflexes were slower. Her vision wasn't what it used to be. She needed reading glasses now, though she'd never admit it officially. And she was leading 3 other pilots, one of them barely 26 years old, into a situation where people would be actively trying to kill them. Disconnect, the boom operator called. Sarah backed away carefully, the boom retracting. Hog 01, you took 8,000 pounds. You're cleared off. Send your number 2. Copy. Hog 02, you're cleared in. Torres moved into position and began his refueling. Sarah rejoined the formation and tried to quiet her doubts. This was what they'd trained for. This was why the A-10 existed. Low, slow, close air support, tank killing, saving troops in contact. The mission that every other platform couldn't or wouldn't do. But training was different from reality. Training didn't involve real bullets, real missiles, real people dying if you failed. Her hand trembled slightly on the stick. She clenched it tight, willing the tremor away. Command meant projecting confidence even when you felt none. Her pilots were counting on her. The soldiers on the ground were counting on her. She couldn't afford doubt. Hog 01, this is Titan 2. A new voice on the radio, rough with stress and exhaustion. Captain Hoffman, the team leader on the ground. We just got word you're inbound. What's your ETA? Sarah checked her navigation computer. Titan 2, Hog 01. We're currently refueling over the Mediterranean. ETA to your position is 2 hours 40 minutes. A pause, then, copy 2 hours 40. Be advised, situation has deteriorated. Enemy armor is within 100 meters of our position. We're taking heavy casualties. We've lost 5 KIA, 4 WIA. We're down to our last belts of ammunition. His voice cracked slightly. We need you here now. 5 dead, 4 wounded. Out of 12 men, that meant only 3 were still combat effective. Sarah's stomach twisted. They were dying while she flew through empty sky, helpless to do anything but keep flying. Titan 2, we're moving as fast as we can. Hold your position. Help is coming. Do you understand? Help is coming. Roger that, we'll do our best. Titan 2 out. The channel went silent. Sarah stared at her instruments, doing calculations she didn't want to do. 2 hours and 40 minutes. At the rate Hoffman's team was taking casualties, would anyone still be alive when they arrived? Behind her, the other pilots completed their refueling and rejoined formation. They climbed back to cruising altitude and pushed east, toward the sunrise, toward the war. Lead, this is 3. Chen's voice quieter than usual. Did you hear that transmission? I heard it. 5 KIA, Jesus, those poor bastards. Stay focused, Viper. We can't help them by dwelling on it. We help them by getting there and killing everything that's trying to kill them. Roger. But Sarah's own advice rang hollow. She couldn't stop dwelling on it. 5 American soldiers dead. Their families would get notifications, the dress uniform, the solemn face, the carefully worded script. The Secretary of Defense regrets to inform you. Lives shattered, futures erased, all because Sarah and her warthogs weren't there fast enough. She thought about Emily again, wondered what her daughter would think if Sarah didn't come home from this mission. Would she understand why her mother had made this choice? Would she forgive the years of absence if they ended in a folded flag and a posthumous medal? Hog 01, Shell 62, we show you fully uploaded. You're cleared to proceed to target area. Good luck out there. Copy, Shell 62. Thanks for the gas. Hog flight push to combat frequency and tactical formation. We're going to work. The 4 A-10s separated slightly, moving from close trail formation to a tactical spread that would give them room to maneuver in combat. Sarah checked her weapons systems one more time. 6 Mavericks, 14 rockets, 1,100 rounds of 30, enough to kill a lot of tanks, enough to save a lot of lives. If they got there in time. If her aging skills were still sharp enough. If they survived the mission. Too many ifs. The eastern horizon began to glow with the first hint of dawn. Pink and orange light creeping across the darkness, beautiful and terrible. Dawn at the target meant good visibility for weapons employment, but it also meant the enemy could see them coming. No surprise, no cover of darkness. Just 4 slow-moving aircraft against whatever anti-aircraft weapons the enemy had positioned. Sarah's hands had stopped trembling. The doubt was still there, coiled in her chest like a snake, but it was manageable now. She'd lived with doubt before. Every combat mission carried doubt. The trick was flying anyway, doing the job anyway, trusting your training and your instincts even when your brain screamed at you to turn around and run. Hog flight weather check, she called. Hog 02, clear skis. Hog 03, visibility unlimited. Hog 04, no weather issues. Copy, Titan 2, Hog 01 checking in. We're 1 hour out. What's your status? Static, then Hoffman's voice barely audible over background explosions. Hog 01, we're still here. Barely. Enemy armor is. Hold on, the sound of automatic weapons fire close and loud. Is inside 50 meters. We won't last another hour. How fast can you get here? Sarah looked at her airspeed indicator, her fuel gauge, her navigation computer. Physics was physics. Time was time. She couldn't fly faster without burning too much fuel. But she could try. Titan 2, increasing speed, will be there in 45 minutes. Hang on, do you hear me? Hang on. She pushed the throttles forward, felt the engines respond, felt her airspeed climb. Fuel consumption increased, but that didn't matter anymore. Getting there mattered. Getting there while someone was still alive to save. Behind her, the other warthogs matched her speed. Ahead, the sun continued to rise. And in a valley she couldn't yet see, men were fighting and dying, counting the minutes until the sound of salvation arrived on titanium wings. The sun broke over the mountain peaks like a blood-red wound, painting the valley below in shades of copper and shadow. Sarah dropped through 15,000 feet, her eyes scanning the terrain, looking for the target area. Smoke rose from multiple points, burning vehicles, explosions, the signature of ongoing combat. Hog flight target area visual, descending to Angels 5 for initial assessment. Combat spread, stay sharp. 2, 3, 4. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as they descended. This was it. 6 years since her last combat mission, and suddenly she was back in the chaos, back in the machinery of death. Her hands moved across switches, master arm ON, weapons hot, gun armed. the familiar sequence that transformed her from pilot to warrior. Titan 2, Hog 01 Flight of 4 checking in on station. We have eyes on smoke. Talk me on to target. The radio erupted with the sound of weapons fire, then Hoffman's voice, hoarse and desperate. Hog 01, thank God. We're in the Wadi, center of the valley. Enemy armor advancing from north and west. 3 T-72s, 4 BMPs. They're right on top of us. Sarah banked hard, dropping to 3,000 feet. The valley materialized below, a dried riverbed cutting through rocky terrain and clustered around it, the enemy force. She could see them clearly now, the angular shapes of T-72 tanks, their turrets traversing toward the Wadi. The BMPs with their tracks churning up dust. Infantry advancing behind the armor. And in the Wadi itself, barely visible, the American position. A handful of figures pinned down, surrounded, about to be overrun. Titan 2, mark your position with smoke, Sarah ordered, her voice calmer than she felt. A moment later, purple smoke billowed from the Wadi. Friendly position marked. Hog Flight, listen up. Those tanks are priority. Mavericks first, then guns. I'm taking the lead tank on the North Ridge. 2, you take the second tank, same group. 3 and 4, work the BMPs on the west side. Call your shots, stay deconflicted, and watch for ground fire. Execute on my mark. Sarah rolled, inverted, and pulled through, diving toward the lead T-72. The world rotated, sky became ground, ground became sky. She rolled upright at 1,500 feet, the tank centered in her targeting display. Her thumb found the Maverick select switch. The missile's infrared seeker locked onto the tank's heat signature with a satisfying tone. Hog 01 in hot, cleared hot, she called to Hoffman. Cleared hot, cleared hot. Sarah pressed the pickle button. The AGM-65 Maverick dropped from her wing with a solid thunk, its rocket motor igniting a second later. The missile streaked downward, riding its infrared beam straight toward the tank. Sarah pulled hard, banking away, GS crushing her into the seat. The Maverick struck the T-72's turret at 600 miles per hour. The shaped charge warhead punched through armor like paper, detonating inside the crew compartment. The tank exploded from within, turret flying 20 feet into the air, flames erupting from every hatch. Splash 1, Sarah called, her voice tight with adrenaline. 2's in, Torres called. Sarah looked back to see Tor's A-10 diving through her altitude, another Maverick dropping away. Seconds later, a second tank erupted in flames. Splash 2. 3's engaging BMPs, Chen called. Her Maverick found a BMP infantry fighting vehicle, the explosion flipping the 14-ton vehicle onto its side. But the enemy was reacting now. Sarah saw muzzle flashes from multiple positions, anti-aircraft guns opening up. Tracers arced through the sky like angry fireflies, 23 rounds searching for targets. A stream of tracers passed 50 feet off her left wing. Hog Flight, we have AAA. Multiple guns, stay unpredictable. 4's taking fire, Simmons's voice higher-pitched now with stress. Break left 4, break left. Sarah threw her stick hard right, diving toward the deck as tracers chased her. The A-10 wasn't fast, but it was nimble at low altitude. She jinked left, then right, never flying straight for more than 2 seconds. Below her, the third T-72 was repositioning, its gun tracking toward the Wadi. No time for missiles, too close, gun run. Sarah armed the GAU-8 Avenger cannon, all 7 barrels of magnificent tank-killing fury. She rolled in, dropping to 200 feet, the T-72 filling her gun sight. The titanium bathtub around her cockpit was about to earn its keep. Hog 01, gun run, danger close. She pressed the trigger. B-R-R-R-R-R-R-R-R-R-T. The sound was unmistakable, unholy, like a giant's zipper being torn open, like God clearing his throat. 70 rounds per second of 30 depleted uranium ammunition erupted from the cannon. The entire aircraft shuddered with recoil so powerful it slowed her airspeed by 30 knots. Spent brass casings, each as long as a beer bottle, ejected from the side of the aircraft. The rounds walked across the T-72 like hammer strikes from heaven. Armor punctured, components shattered. The tank's ammunition cooked off in a secondary explosion that sent the turret cartwheeling across the valley floor. Sarah pulled up hard, barely clearing the ridgeline, her altimeter reading 50 feet. Splash 3, oh my God, that was beautiful, Hoffman screamed over the radio. Keep it coming. But Sarah's warning lights were screaming. The master caution light blazed red. She'd taken hits. Somewhere, somehow, rounds had found her aircraft. Leads hit, she called, assessing damage. Hydraulic pressure dropping on System A, flight controls still responsive. Both engines running, fuel holding steady. Battle damage but not critical. The A-10 could take punishment that would destroy any other aircraft. That's what she was built for. I'm staying in the fight, Sarah announced. 3-4, work those BMPs. 2, you're with me on the infantry. Tor's A-10 screamed past below her, so low his jet wash kicked up dust. His cannon roared, BRRRRRT, and enemy infantry positions simply ceased to exist, torn apart by third-aim fire. Chen and Simmons worked in tandem, alternating gun runs on the remaining BMPs. The vehicles tried to maneuver, tried to escape, but the Warthogs were relentless. Chen's rockets found one BMP, 14 2.75-inch rockets, turning it into scrap metal. Simmons put a Maverick into another, then followed up with her cannon for good measure. The valley had become hell, smoke everywhere, burning vehicles, bodies. The surviving enemy infantry was breaking, running, abandoning their positions. But one BMP remained, its third-aim cannon still firing, still advancing on the American position. I've got the last one, Sarah called, rolling in for another gun run. This time she saw the anti-aircraft gun tracking her, saw the muzzle flashes, felt the impacts as 23 rounds punched into her aircraft. The right engine fire light illuminated, more hydraulic warnings. The aircraft shuddered, wounded but not dead. She kept the pipper on target and fired. BRRRRRRRRRRT. The BMP exploded. The anti-aircraft gun fell silent, either destroyed by her wingmen or abandoned by its crew. Sarah pulled up, fighting the controls. The right engine was on fire, but the left was still good. Hydraulics were failing, but she had manual reversion. The aircraft was badly damaged, but still flying. Leads hit bad, Chen called. You're trailing smoke. I'm still flying. Everyone else okay? 2's good. 3's good. Some holes, but nothing critical. 4's okay. Sarah keyed the radio. Titan 2, Hog 01. Target area is clear. All enemy armor destroyed. Infantry is broken and running. You're clear to extract. For a moment only static. Then Hoffman's voice choked with emotion. Hog 01, you magnificent sons of bitches. You saved our lives, all of us. We're moving now. Thank you. God, thank you. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes, but her voice remained steady. That's the job, Titan 2. That's the job. She checked her aircraft status. Right engine shut down and secured. Fire out. Hydraulics at 20%. Flight controls sluggish but manageable. Fuel tanks hold, but holding enough for maybe an hour of flight time. Hog flight, form up on me. We're going home. The 4 Warthogs, 3 intact, 1 smoking and damaged, climbed away from the valley as the sun fully cleared the mountains. Below them, 7 Americans and 15 Allied fighters began their extraction, alive because 4 pilots in 40-year-old jets had refused to let them die. Tor's voice came over the radio, quiet and reverent. Lead, that was the most badass flying I've ever seen. Sarah didn't respond. She was too busy keeping her damaged bird in the air, too busy processing what they'd just done, too busy fighting the shakes that came after combat, when adrenaline faded and reality set in. They'd done it, against all odds, against all regulations, against common sense. They'd brought the thunder. And 12 Americans would go home to their families. The flight back was the longest of Sarah's life. Her right engine was gone, shut down and cold. The left engine ran rough, vibrating through the airframe in a way that made her teeth ache. Hydraulic fluid leaked from somewhere in the belly, leaving a thin contrail in the sky behind her. Every control input required twice the force it should. The stick felt like it was moving through concrete. But A-242 kept flying. Wounded, bleeding hydraulic fluid and jet fuel, with holes punched through her wings and fuselage, but flying, just like she'd been designed to do. "Lead, how you holding up?" Torres called for the third time in as many minutes. "Still here too, still flying." They'd missed their planned tanker rendezvous. Sarah's damaged bird couldn't maintain the altitude or speed needed. Command had scrambled an emergency tanker to meet them at lower altitude over the Atlantic. Sarah had taken fuel one-handed, the other hand fighting the controls, while Torres and Chen flew formation on her wings to call out any position errors. It had taken 20 agonizing minutes, every second a battle against failing hydraulics and unresponsive controls. Now, 8 hours after takeoff, the Arizona desert finally appeared on the horizon. Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Home. Except it didn't look like home anymore. As they approached, Sarah could see the chaos on the ground. Fire trucks positioned along the runway, ambulances standing by. And her stomach dropped. At least 24 vehicles clustered near the operations building. News vans with satellite dishes. Staff cars with flags. The base commander's vehicle. This wasn't going to be a quiet landing. Tower Hog 01 flight 10 miles out, requesting priority landing. Lead aircraft has battle damage, right engine out, hydraulics failing. Hog 01, you're cleared to land any runway. Emergency equipment is standing by, sir. Ma'am, Colonel, there are a lot of people waiting to talk to you. I bet there are. We'll land first, talk later. Sarah lined up on runway 12, the same runway they'd departed from nearly 15 hours earlier. Her airspeed bled off, 150 knots, 140, 130. The aircraft wallowed in the air, reluctant to fly, eager to land. The runway threshold passed beneath her. She eased back on the stick, feeling the main gear kiss the concrete with a satisfying thump. A-242 rolled down the runway trailing smoke, fire trucks packing her on the taxiway. She brought the aircraft to a stop on the hammerhead, shut down the remaining engine, and sat in sudden, deafening silence. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She'd done it. They'd done it. Flown an unauthorized combat mission in aircraft that were supposed to be retired, saved 12 American lives, and brought everyone home alive. Now came the reckoning. Sarah unstrapped, climbed down the ladder on legs that felt like rubber, and stood next to her aircraft for a moment. The Warthog looked like it had been through a war, because it had. Holes punched in the wings, scorch marks from the engine fire, hydraulic fluid and fuel staining the concrete beneath it. Master Sergeant Vasquez was already there, running his hands over the damage, shaking his head in disbelief. "Colonel, I count 47 holes, 47, and she brought you home anyway." His voice was thick with emotion. "Damn good bird." "The best," Sarah agreed quietly. A staff car screeched to a halt nearby, and Colonel Martinez jumped out, his face purple with rage. Behind him, more cars disgorged officers in dress uniforms, civilians with briefcases, and media crews with cameras. "Mackenzie, what the hell did you do?" Martinez shouted, storming toward her. "You launched an unauthorized combat mission with aircraft in decommissioned status. You violated about 50 regulations. The Pentagon is losing its mind. The base commander at Al-Udeid wants to know why you didn't coordinate. Congress is." 12 Americans are alive because of what we did," Sarah interrupted, her voice quiet but hard as steel. "That's what I did, Colonel. I saved 12 lives. Martinez stopped, his mouth working soundlessly. Behind him, the crowd had grown. Sarah recognized a two-star general she'd never met, several Pentagon staffers, and there, emerging from a news van, a CNN correspondent with a camera crew. The general stepped forward. "Colonel Mackenzie, I'm Major General Patricia Rhodes, Air Combat Command. We need to debrief immediately. Your mission was successful, but the irregularities." "General, with respect, my pilots have been flying for 15 hours straight. We need rest, food, and medical checks. The debrief can wait 4 hours." Rhodes studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "4 hours, my office, don't be late." As the general turned away, the CNN correspondent rushed forward, microphone extended. "Colonel Mackenzie, is it true you flew a combat rescue mission in aircraft that were being retired? Can you comment on reports that you saved a Special Forces team?" Sarah looked at the camera, exhausted and still shaking from adrenaline come-down, and made a decision. The Pentagon would be angry anyway. Might as well make it count. "The A-10 Warthog is the finest close air support aircraft ever built," she said clearly. "Today we proved that. 4 aircraft, 4 pilots, and we stopped an enemy force that was about to overrun American soldiers. We did what no other platform could do, got low, got close, and stayed until the job was done. That's what the Warthog does. That's what it's always done. And the Air Force wants to retire it." "Colonel," Martinez tried to intervene, but Sarah kept talking. 12 men are going home to their families tonight because the A-10 still exists. Remember that when Congress votes on the retirement bill." The reporter started to ask another question, but Torres, Chen, and Simmons had formed up around Sarah, a protective wall between her and the cameras. "Interview's over," Torres said flatly. "The colonel needs rest." They walked toward the operations building together, leaving the chaos behind. Williams met them at the door with coffee and protein bars. "Boss, that was either the smartest or stupidest thing you've ever said on camera," he said, handing her a cup. "Probably both." Sarah took a long drink. "The coffee was terrible and wonderful. What's the fallback looking like?" "Pentagon's in full damage control mode. Congress is demanding hearings, but," Williams smiled slightly, "social media is exploding. Save the Warthog is trending. Veterans groups are rallying. And the Special Forces community is making a lot of noise about how the Air Force tried to retire the only platform that could save their people." 4 hours later, Sarah sat in General Rhodes's temporary office, still in her flight suit, facing a room full of senior officers and Pentagon officials. The debrief had been thorough and professional. They'd gone through every decision, every regulation violated, every risk taken. Now came the verdict. "Colonel Mackenzie," Rhodes began, "what you did was reckless, unauthorized, and violated numerous regulations and protocols." Sarah kept her face neutral. Here it came, court-martial, end of career, dishonorable discharge. "It was also," Rhodes continued, "the most exceptional display of airmanship, courage, and devotion to duty I've seen in 30 years of service. You saved 12 American lives. You proved that institutional knowledge and combat experience matter, and you reminded everyone what the Air Force is actually for." Sarah blinked, uncertain she'd heard correctly. Rhodes leaned forward. "The A-10 retirement has been suspended pending congressional review. The 354th Fighter Squadron is being reactivated, and you're being recommended for the Air Force Cross." Silence filled the room. Sarah felt tears threatening but held them back. "General, I'm supposed to retire in 2 weeks." "I know, your retirement packet is on my desk, unsigned." Rhodes pushed a different folder across the table. "This is an offer to take command of the reconstituted 354th, 2-year assignment, build the squadron back up, train the next generation of Warthog pilots. You'd make full colonel." Sarah stared at the folder. 2 more years. 2 years of flying, of purpose, of doing what she did best. 2 years of missing her daughter's life. 2 years of breaking promises. Can I have 24 hours to decide? You can have 48. Sarah stood, saluted, and walked out of the office in a daze. The hallway was empty except for one person sitting on a bench outside. Emily. Her daughter stood, wearing jeans and a Georgetown sweatshirt, her eyes red from crying. Mom. Sweetie, what are you? How did you? Uncle Marcus called me, told me you'd launched on a combat mission. I've been tracking the news all day, terrified you weren't coming back. Emily's voice broke. You promised you were done. Sarah felt her heart shatter. I know I'm sorry, but there were soldiers. There are always soldiers, Mom. There's always a mission. When is it enough? When do I get to have a mother? Emily was crying now, angry and hurt and exhausted. Sarah had no answer. How could she explain that those 12 men had families too? That someone had to answer the call. That purpose and duty weren't just words but the core of who she was. I love you, Sarah said quietly. I know I haven't shown it the way you needed. I know I've chosen wrong too many times, but everything I've done I did believing I was making the world safer. For you, for everyone. Emily wiped her eyes. I saw your interview, what you said about the Warthog, about saving those men, and I understood. For the first time I actually understood. She took a shaky breath. I'm still angry, I'm still hurt, but I'm also really, really proud of you. They stood in the hallway, mother and daughter, separated by years of absence and united by blood and the fragile hope of reconciliation. They offered me 2 more years, Sarah said. Command of the squadron, rebuilding it from scratch. Are you going to take it? Sarah looked out the window at the flight line. A-10 sat in the hangar, surrounded by maintenance crews already beginning repairs. The Warthog that had carried her to war and brought her home. The platform that had saved 12 lives. I don't know, she said honestly. Part of me wants to. Part of me knows I should retire, should finally be the mother you deserved. What do you think I should do? Emily was quiet for a long moment. I think you should do what makes you who you are. You're Colonel Sarah Mackenzie, you save people, that's your calling. She smiled through tears. But maybe I could visit sometimes, see where you work, understand that part of your life better. Sarah pulled her daughter into a hug, holding tight, feeling the years of distance begin to close. I'd like that very much. The next morning, Sarah walked out to the flight line at dawn. A-10 sat gleaming in the early light, patched, repaired, ready to fly again. She ran her hand along the titanium skin, feeling the history beneath her fingers. On the aircraft's nose, the maintenance crew had added something new, a fresh mission mark. One more tally. One more day the Warthog had done what it was built to do. Sarah had made her decision. She signed the command papers that afternoon. 2 more years. Time enough to rebuild the squadron, to train new pilots, to ensure the legacy continued. Time enough to forge a new relationship with her daughter, one based on honesty and understanding rather than absence and resentment. The retirement ceremony was rescheduled, postponed indefinitely. The Warthog's retirement was canceled. And Colonel Sarah Mackenzie went back to work, doing what she did best, leading from the front, training the next generation, and making sure that when Americans called for help, the sound of the Avenger cannon would always answer. Some legends don't retire. They just wait for their moment to roar again. The end.